Welcome back, and joining us for more on the day's markets action is Trive Investments' Shaun Dendere. Thank you so much for your time, Shaun. I actually see that it's quite interesting because the US markets and the European markets are in the green. The JSE is trading relatively flat. Even the Rand is relatively flat at 18 Rand 51. And I'm wondering if the markets at this point are just in waiting, and particularly the South African market.
All right. First of all, thank you for having me. I think it is an interesting time. Obviously, the new American president got inaugurated on Monday. So there is a lot of uncertainty. I think from a U.S. and European perspective, I mean, Europe, like you mentioned earlier, it's being driven by Adidas, basically a single stock that's, pushing that index up. From an American perspective, I think it's still an element of a Trump trade, if you want to call it that. Yeah. Now that he's in power, there is a lot of positivity, make America great again. So it is, a lot of sentiment on the ground, despite, what's happening from an actual data perspective.
It's quite interesting also looking at Adidas, because there was a point when there was so much uncertainty on the earnings because of the whole tussle that they were having with Yeezy, but seeming that that has been worked out of the system. Let's come back home and take a look at some of the economic data that came out, because we had retail sales and consumer inflation. Let's actually start off there with retail sales. Quite interesting in November, up 7%, 7.7% year on year. Is this really just a signal of the consumer's confidence coming back?
I don't want to necessarily say consumer confidence coming back per se, but I think it's a sign of the times.
Yeah.
We were suffering with high inflation, high interest rates. So we've seen, the interest rates have started to go down. Hopefully, end of this month, we're going to get another cut there. Inflation is easing. As much as, you mentioned CPI going up to 3% in December, it's still well below, the Reserve Bank target. But there's also another thing that also happened last year that we should take into consideration is the two-pot system. That there were also a lot of withdrawals. So I think there was a lot of purchasing power that, consumers gained towards the end of the year. And that, in my opinion, that drove, the retail, that 7.7% retail number up. And also, I think it also pushed that inflation number up from 2.9% to 3%.
Yeah. We actually have such short-term memories, because we were talking about the two-pot system a lot in the final quarter of last year. I'd even forgotten about it, Shaun. But just looking at that, it's still, as we're talking about retail, Mr. Price coming out with a 13-week voluntary update, double-digit growth in sales in the last 2024 quarter with market share gains there. But the share dipping slightly, but something tells me that that share dip has absolutely nothing to do with the performance from Mr. Price that we saw.
100%. I think the share is down about 2% today, which is really strange because, those results or that update was really, really strong. Yeah. And I think it also ties back into, the retail sales number and the factors that we're speaking about, the inflation, the two-pot system, the interest rate cuts. And, in my opinion, also, I think Mr. Price also services the mass market, and I guess from a price point. And also, it's also diversified, their product portfolio. So I think that's really doing well for their numbers. I think they also recently even opened their 3,000th shop or store. So it seems like bright sparks for Mr. Price going forward.
Yeah, right. I just want to bring it back to consumer inflation. You did mention it earlier, ticking up 3% in December. Does this shift any of your views in terms of what the MPC could decide on next week?
I do not think so. I think or hoping for a further cut next week, because if we're looking at that number, we're way below the band. So there is a bit more room to play with, but we obviously have to be very cautious about how we accelerate the cuts. But there is room for the Reserve Bank to actually cut rates, in my opinion.
Right. Well, talking about room, what do you have room for in your portfolio? What is your stock pick for today?
So my stock pick today is good old NVIDIA, back to the AI game. And this is really because we're looking at Trump's administration. I think he just announced a $500 billion AI investment fund. So there is going to be a lot of cash and a lot of growth in AI. And NVIDIA has historically been doing well, and AI is here to stay.
Yeah, which is quite apt, looking at the fact that the big theme at the World Economic Forum this week is AI, basically the intelligent age. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your insights there on what has been moving investors' money today. Shaun, that was Shaun Dendere from Trive Investments.